It all began when we moved to that old house. My folks wanted someplace quiet, away from the city noise. They figured a big, rambling place in a small town was the ticket. Me? I wasn't thrilled. I liked my friends, my life back in the city. But you know how parents are. Their minds were made up. The house itself was imposing, big, with dark wood and these high ceilings that seemed to swallow sound. The windows were tall and narrow, like eyes watching the street. My room was on the second floor at the back. It had this one window that looked out on the woods behind the house. I remember thinking it was creepy even in broad daylight. My parents were happy, though. They loved the space, the quiet. They kept saying how peaceful it was. Me, I couldn't shake this feeling, like I was being watched. It was just a feeling, you know? I figured it was just me being a city kid, not used to the quiet. The first few days were okay. We unpacked, my parents started fixing up the garden, you know, the usual stuff. I tried to make the best of it. Explored the town a bit, tried to find kids my age. It was a small place, though. Quiet. Too quiet. At night, the house creaked. My parents said it was old, settling. But the sounds, they seemed to be everywhere. Footsteps in the hall outside my room. The floorboards groaning downstairs, even though everyone was asleep. I started sleeping with my headphones on, just to block it out. One night, I woke up to this scratching sound. It was coming from the window. I sat up, heart pounding, and looked. Nothing. Just the trees, swaying in the wind. I told myself it was probably just a branch, but I didn't sleep much that night. The nightmare started a few weeks in. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, heart racing. I couldn't remember what they were about, just this overwhelming sense of dread. It was like something was trying to tell me something, warn me. One night, I woke up to a sound. It was faint, like someone whispering my name. I sat up in bed, listening hard. The sound came again, a little louder this time. It definitely came from the closet. My heart hammered in my chest. It felt like the air had turned to ice. I grabbed my phone, the screen illuminating the room with a faint glow. Taking a deep breath, I slowly walked towards the closet, my hand shaking as I reached for the doorknob. As I pulled the door open, my heart leaped into my throat. It was empty, nothing but clothes and a few boxes. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm my racing pulse. I tried to brush it off, told myself it was just my imagination, the stress of the move. But deep down, I couldn't shake this feeling that something wasn't right. It was like the house itself was watching me, listening. The whispers started to get more frequent, always at night, always my name, just barely audible, like whoever or whatever was saying it didn't want me to understand. They seemed to be coming from different parts of the house, sometimes the hall outside my room, sometimes down in the basement. I told my parents about the noises. Of course, they didn't believe me. They said it was just the house settling, that I was letting my imagination run wild. But I knew what I was hearing, and it was getting worse. The more I tried to ignore it, the stronger it got. The whispers, the shadows moving at the edge of my vision, the feeling of being watched, it was constant. I started sleeping less and less. I was always on edge, jumpy at every little sound. One day I was home alone. My parents were in town picking up groceries. I was up in my room trying to focus on a book, but the whispers were there, just at the edge of my hearing. Then I heard it. A thump from downstairs, like someone had knocked something over. I froze, listening. My heart was pounding in my ears. I told myself it was nothing, that it was probably just the wind or something. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Very wrong. Something shifted inside me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was acceptance. Like I knew something was terribly wrong, but I was powerless to stop it. The whispers became a constant companion, a sinister soundtrack to my every waking moment. I started seeing things too, fleeting shadows out of the corner of my eye, objects moving on their own. Once I swear I saw a figure standing at the end of the hall just outside my room. It was tall and gaunt, shrouded in darkness. I blinked and it was gone. I stopped telling my parents about it. What was the point? They wouldn't believe me. They'd probably think I was losing my mind. But I knew I wasn't imagining things. Something was in that house with us. Something dark and evil. I knew I couldn't just sit there and wait for whatever it was to make its move. I had to do something. So I did the only thing I could think of. I started researching. I spent hours online reading about haunted houses, paranormal activity, anything I could find. That's how I stumbled upon a website about local legends, and that's where I found it. A story about our house. It was brief, just a paragraph or two, but it was enough. It said that the previous owner, a man who had lived there alone, had gone insane. Claimed that the house was haunted by evil spirits. He had died in the house. They found him in the basement. The official cause of death was a heart attack. But the article mentioned something else, something chilling. They said that when they found his body, his eyes were wide open, staring at something only he could see. And his face, it was frozen in an expression of pure terror. The more I learned, the more terrified I became. The house, it turned out, had a long and dark history. It had been built on an ancient burial ground. There were stories of countless tragedies that had happened within its walls. Murders, suicides, accidents. It was like the house itself was cursed. I knew I had to tell my parents. We couldn't stay there. It was too dangerous. But I was scared. What if they didn't believe me? What if they thought I was crazy? But I knew I had to try. So one night at dinner, I took a deep breath and told them everything. The whispers, the shadows, the stories I had found online. I poured out my heart to them, begging them to believe me. To my surprise, they didn't laugh. They didn't dismiss me as crazy. They just sat there, their faces pale, listening intently. When I was finished, my mom reached across the table and took my hand. Her touch was cold, trembling. "We should never have moved here," she whispered, her voice thick with fear. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't want to believe it. My dad nodded grimly. "We were foolish," he said. "We thought we could outrun our problems. But some things you just can't escape." That night we huddled together in the living room, too scared to sleep. The whispers seemed louder than ever, swirling around us like a malevolent wind. We were trapped. The house creaked and groaned around us, a symphony of unsettling sounds. Each gust of wind that rattled the old windows felt like the icy breath of something sinister on the back of our necks. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to writhe and deepen, taking on menacing shapes. We were prisoners in our own home, held captive by an unseen force that seemed to feed on our terror. The whispers had become a constant, oppressive presence, a chorus of disembodied voices that seemed to mock our fear. We never escaped. The house claimed us, just like it had claimed so many others before us. Our story became another dark chapter in the long and bloody history of the house on the hill. And the whispers? They continued, echoing through the empty rooms, a chilling reminder that some evils never truly die.